The Craven Brotherhood had never known fear. For 300 standard galactic years, they had carved their reputation across 1,000 star systems with plasma fire and ruthless efficiency. Their scales, harder than most starship hulls, gleamed obsidian black under the artificial lights of the War Council chamber aboard their flagship, the Deathbringer. Commander Vextor stood at the head of the tactical display, his forearms crossed in a gesture of supreme confidence. Standing 3 meters tall, with muscles that could crush steel beams, he was the epitome of craven might. Around him, his lieutenants, each a veteran of countless campaigns, studied the holographic projection of their latest contract. The Galactic Trade Consortium offers us 50 million credits to secure this backwater system. Vextor's voice rumbled like grinding stone. The inhabitants call themselves humans. According to intelligence reports, they're a recently discovered species, barely 2 centuries into space travel. Lieutenant Zarkon snorted, a sound like superheated steam escaping from a fusion reactor. 2 centuries? We've been perfecting the art of war for millennia. This will be easier than suppressing the Centauri uprising. The other mercenaries laughed, a harsh sound that would have terrified most species in the galaxy. The Craven were not just mercenaries. They were artists of destruction, connoisseurs of conquest. Their reputation was built on an unbroken string of victories against some of the most dangerous species in known space. Intelligence suggests they have primitive projectile weapons and basic energy shields, another lieutenant added, manipulating the hologram to show images of human soldiers. They're soft, pink creatures. No natural armor, no claws, minimal physical strength. Their military forces are scattered across their colonies. Vextor studied the images with professional interest. The humans appeared almost comically fragile compared to his warriors. Where the Craven had evolved on a death world with triple standard gravity and predators that could bite through metal, these humans seemed to have developed on some garden paradise. They stood barely 2 meters tall at most, with thin skin that looked like it would tear at the slightest touch. "What about their fleet?" Vextor asked, though he expected little. 37 vessels in this system, Commander. Our scans show basic fusion drives and primitive mass drivers. Our single dreadnought could destroy them all without depleting shields. The commander's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. The Deathbringer alone carried enough firepower to glass a small moon. With their full mercenary fleet of 15 warships, this would be a massacre. "Deploy the announcement," Vextor ordered. "Let them know the Craven Brotherhood comes to claim their world. Give them the standard terms: immediate surrender, minimal casualties. Resistance means total annihilation." The message was broadcast on all frequencies, translated into the human language by their advanced AI systems. Vextor had given this ultimatum hundreds of times before. Most species surrendered immediately upon learning who they faced. The smart ones anyway. Hours passed. The Craven fleet moved into attack formation, approaching the human colony world designated as New Sparta. It was a dusty, red planet that reminded Vextor of his homeworld, though far less hostile. Sensor sweeps showed 3 major population centers and numerous smaller settlements. Military installations were clearly marked. The humans hadn't even tried to hide them. "Commander, we're receiving a transmission from the planet's surface," the communications officer announced. "Display it." The hologram shifted to show a human face. Male, by their standards, with short-cropped gray hair and hard eyes. He wore a uniform marked with symbols that their translation matrix identified as military rank insignia. The nameplate read, "Colonel Marcus Stone, United Earth Marine Corps. This is Colonel Stone, commanding officer of the 3rd Marine Division. I've received your terms, Craven Brotherhood." The human's voice was calm, almost conversational. "Here's our counteroffer. Turn your ships around and leave human space immediately. This is your only warning." The bridge erupted in laughter. Zarkon slammed his tail against the deck plating in mirth. "The little pink thing threatens us? How amusing!" Vextor raised a hand for silence, studying the human commander's face. There was something in those eyes, something he'd seen before in the most dangerous opponents he'd faced, but surely not from these fragile creatures. "Colonel Stone," Vextor replied, allowing his full height to show in the transmission. "I am Commander Vextor of the Craven Brotherhood. We have conquered species far more advanced than yours. We have burned worlds that resisted us. Your Marines are nothing but—" "Cut the speech," Stone interrupted, which shocked the Craven Bridge into silence. No one interrupted a Craven commander. "I've read your file. 300 years of bullying species who can't fight back properly. Impressive record. But you've never fought humans before. Your arrogance will cost your species dearly," Vexator growled. Stone smiled then, and something about that expression sent an uncomfortable chill down Vextor's spine. "No, Commander. Your ignorance will cost you everything. You want to know the difference between humans and every other species you've conquered." "Enlighten me," Vextor said with mock courtesy. "We've been killing each other for millions of years. We've turned war into science, art, and religion all at once. We've split atoms to burn cities, engineered plagues to erase populations, and built machines whose only purpose is to end life more efficiently. And that was before we reached the stars." Stone leaned forward. "You know what we call your kind of warfare? Tuesday morning exercise." The transmission ended. Vextor stood in stunned silence for a moment before his rage took over. "Prepare for planetary assault. I want their cities burning within the hour." The Craven dropships launched from the carrier bays like deadly rain. Each contained 50 of the Brotherhood's finest warriors, armed with plasma rifles, molecular blades, and protected by personal shield generators that could deflect most energy weapons. They descended toward the largest military installation on the planet's surface, a sprawling complex designated as Firebase Thermopylae. In the lead dropship, Strike Leader Korval checked his weapons one final time. Around him, his warriors sang their battle hymn, a terrifying discord that had broken the morale of armies before the fighting even began. They would teach these arrogant humans the price of defying the Craven Brotherhood. "Entering atmosphere in 30 seconds, the pilot announced. "No anti-air fire detected." Korval's mandibles clicked in disappointment. He had hoped for at least token resistance. It would make the slaughter more satisfying. The dropship shuddered as it hit atmosphere, heat shields glowing white-hot. Through the viewports, Korval could see the red landscape rushing up to meet them. The firebase looked pathetically small from this height, just a collection of prefab buildings and defensive positions that wouldn't last 5 minutes against Craven weapons. "Landing in 10 seconds. Prepare for—" The pilot never finished his sentence. A hypersonic projectile, launched from a concealed railgun position 20 kilometers away, punched through the dropship's shields like they were made of paper. The kinetic energy transferred into the craft turned the interior into a crematorium in milliseconds. The wreckage scattered across 3 square kilometers of desert. Across the landing zone, similar fates befell a dozen other dropships. The humans had turned their defensive positions into carefully calculated kill zones. Every approach vector had been mapped, every possible landing site pre-targeted. Marines manning concealed positions waited with patient discipline born from centuries of warfare against their own kind. The surviving dropships scattered, pilots frantically trying to evade the devastating railgun fire. But the humans had anticipated this too. Smaller weapons positions opened up with streams of depleted uranium rounds that chewed through hull plating. Missile batteries, hidden beneath adaptive camouflage that had fooled Craven sensors, sent seekers racing into the sky. Strike Leader Korval's ship managed to reach the ground, though half its engines were burning and shields were failing. He led his warriors out, roaring orders to form defensive positions. They had landed 2 kilometers from their intended target in a boulder field that would provide cover. "Form up! Advance by squads! Show these primitives craven might!" His warriors moved with practiced precision, using the rocks for cover as they advanced toward the fire base. Their personal shields shimmered as small arms fire began to impact. Corval sneered. Projectile weapons were ancient technology, ineffective against modern defenses. Then the first Marine sniper found his mark. The bullet wasn't ordinary. It was a specialized armor-piercing round with a monomolecular tip and a core of hyperdense alloy. Designed specifically to defeat energy shields through a combination of velocity and exotic materials, it punched through a warrior's shield, armor, and skull with equal ease. The craven warrior toppled backward, very clearly dead. "Impossible!" Corval roared. "Maintain advance! Close to plasma range!" More shots rang out. More warriors fell. The Marines weren't firing wildly. Each shot was calculated, aimed at weak points in craven armor. Headshots, joint impacts, targeting sensor arrays. They worked in teams, one spotter for each shooter, communicating in quick, professional bursts. Corval's squad reached a ridge overlooking the approaches to the fire base. Finally, they could bring their superior firepower to bear. Plasma rifles unleashed blue-white death toward the human positions, turning sand to glass and melting through defensive barriers. The counterattack came from below. Marines had spent the previous night infiltrating the boulder field, setting up positions, waiting. Now they emerged like ghosts, attacking from ranges so close that craven weapons were difficult to bring to bear. Combat knives found gaps in armor. Shotguns loaded with specialized rounds fired point-blank into shields, overloading them. But it was the Marines themselves that truly shocked the craven. A human soldier, his arm nearly severed by a plasma blast, continued fighting with his sidearm. Another, missing half his face from shrapnel, dragged a wounded comrade to safety before returning to his position. They fought with a savagery that the craven had never encountered. Not the hot rage of a cornered animal, but the cold, calculated violence of a species that had turned killing into instinct. "They're insane!" one of Corval's warriors screamed, before a Marine put 3 rounds through his throat. No, Corval realized as he watched a human deliberately detonate explosives strapped to his chest to take out a squad of craven warriors. Not insane, worse, they were experienced. In space, Commander Vextor watched the tactical feeds with growing disbelief. His elite warriors, each worth 100 soldiers of any other species, were being systematically destroyed by humans using weapons that belonged in a museum. "Launch the second wave," he ordered. "Full bombardment pattern. Turn that entire region to glass." "Commander," his sensor officer interrupted, voice tight with something that might have been fear. "Human vessels are moving to intercept. They're not trying to evade. They're accelerating directly at us." On the screen, the human fleet moved with suicidal determination. 37 ships against 15 of the most advanced warships in the galaxy. It should have been a joke. The lead human vessel, a blocky thing that looked like someone had strapped engines to an asteroid, opened fire at maximum range. Mass drivers hurled chunks of metal at significant fractions of light speed. The craven shields handled them easily. "Return fire! All batteries!" Plasma beams lanced out, each one capable of cracking a small moon. The human ship's shields flickered and died. Hull plating vaporized, but it kept coming. "What are they doing?" Zarkon demanded. The answer came as the human vessel reached point-blank range. Instead of trying to escape or return fire, it simply rammed into the craven destroyer, Bloodfang. The impact was tremendous, but what followed was worse. The human ship's fusion reactors, deliberately overloaded, detonated with the force of a small star. When the radiation cleared, the Bloodfang was gone. So was the human ship. "Madness," someone whispered. More human ships followed the same pattern. They fought just long enough to close distance, then turned themselves into guided missiles. They targeted engines, weapon arrays, shield generators, sacrificing themselves to cripple Craven vessels. And from the planet's surface, new threats emerged. Hidden silos opened, launching missiles that had been waiting for just this moment. Not advanced by galactic standards, but numerous. Hundreds of them, each carrying warheads designed not to penetrate shields, but to overload them through sheer volume of impact. The Craven fleet found itself in a nightmare. Every tactical doctrine they knew assumed enemies would try to preserve their forces. The humans treated their ships and soldiers as ammunition to be expended for maximum effect. Worse, their tactics were working. On the ground, Firebase Thermopylae had become a charnel house. Craven bodies littered the approaches, their advanced armor and weapons scattered across blood-soaked sand. The Marines had turned the base into a fortress of interlocking fields of fire, kill zones, and trap after trap. But it was in the close-quarters fighting that the true horror revealed itself. The Craven were stronger, faster, better armed. In any stand-up fight, they should have dominated. The humans didn't fight fair. They used improvised explosives, turning everyday objects into weapons. They fought in coordinated teams, each member willing to die to create an opening for another. They targeted warriors who seemed to be leaders, disrupting Craven command structure. They booby-trapped their own wounded, turning mercy into a fatal mistake. And through it all, they communicated with a calm professionalism that chilled Craven blood. No panic, no fear, just quiet voices coordinating death. Bravo 6, this is Overwatch. 3 hostiles approaching your position bearing 270. Copy, Overwatch. Johnson, frag out. Williams, covering fire. Martinez, you're on cleanup. Roger, moving. It was warfare reduced to its most basic, brutal form, executed with a precision that came from countless generations of practice. Strike leader Corval, bleeding from multiple wounds, crouched behind the burning wreck of a Craven assault vehicle. Of the 50 warriors he'd led into battle, fewer than a dozen remained. They were pinned down by sniper fire, unable to advance or retreat. "Strike leader," one of his warriors gasped. "We should surrender." "Perhaps they'll show mercy." Corval was about to agree when he heard the distinctive whine of human aircraft approaching. Relief flooded through him. Surely aerial bombardment would save them. The aircraft passed overhead, but instead of bombs, they dropped canisters that burst open on impact. White smoke billowed out, covering the battlefield. "Cover!" Corval roared, expecting chemical weapons. But the smoke was just smoke. Obscuring vision, nothing more. Then he heard them coming. Footsteps, dozens of them, moving through the smoke with practiced ease, thermal imaging and decades of muscle memory guiding them. The Marines advanced with mechanical precision, weapons up, every angle covered. They emerged from the smoke like death incarnate. Not the polished, high-tech death the Craven represented, but the raw, primitive death that had stalked battlefields since the first human picked up a rock in anger. "Fix bayonets," someone ordered in that terrifyingly calm human voice. The last thing Strike Leader Corval saw was a young human face, scarred and dirty, eyes holding absolutely no mercy as he drove 30 centimeters of steel through the gap in Corval's armor. Commander Vextor stared at the tactical displays in growing horror. 3 hours into the battle, and the Craven Brotherhood was losing. Not retreating, not struggling, losing. In 3 centuries of warfare, he had never seen casualty figures like these. "Sir," his intelligence officer reported, voice shaking, "we've lost contact with all ground forces at Firebase Thermopylae. The 2nd and 3rd waves are reporting 80% casualties. The humans, they're not fighting like any species we've encountered." "Explain," Vextor demanded, though he could see the truth on the screens. "They don't break. Even when outnumbered, outgunned, facing certain death, they keep fighting. And, sir, they're learning. Each wave we send meets new tactics, adapted from what worked against the previous assault. The holographic display showed the battlefield in stark detail. Craven drop zones had become killing fields. The humans had turned their entire defensive perimeter into a maze of overlapping fire zones, hidden positions, and traps that seemed to multiply by the hour. Worse, human reinforcements kept arriving, not the panicked rush of defenders, but organized units moving with clockwork precision. "Launch orbital bombardment," Vextor ordered. "If we cannot take the surface, we'll deny it to them. Sir, the human ships are dying by the dozens. They cannot stop us all." As if to mock his words, proximity alarms screamed across the bridge. A human vessel, little more than engines strapped to a cargo hauler, had somehow slipped through their defensive screen. It slammed into the Ravager's port shields at 40% light speed, detonating its overloaded reactors on impact. The shields held, but barely. Warning lights flashed across damage control stations. "How?" Zarkon roared. "Our sensors should have detected them." "They're using their own debris as cover," the sensor officer reported. "Flying dead stick through the wreckage fields, only lighting engines at the last moment. We can't distinguish them from floating hulks until they move." It was brilliant. It was insane. It was utterly human. Another alarm. 3 more human vessels, accelerating on collision courses from different vectors. The Craven guns spoke, turning 2 into expanding clouds of plasma. The third kept coming, shedding hull plating, bleeding atmosphere, crew probably dead from acceleration alone. But the ship's computer didn't care about dead crew. It had one last order to fulfill. The impact shattered the Deathbringer's starboard shield array. Not enough to cripple the massive dreadnought, but enough to make Vextor realize a terrible truth. The humans were willing to trade ships for damage at ratios that would horrify any sane species. And they were making it work. On the planet below, Colonel Marcus Stone stood in the command bunker of Firebase Thermopylae, studying tactical displays with the same calm intensity he'd shown throughout the battle. Around him, his staff worked with quiet efficiency, coordinating the defense that had turned Craven technological superiority into a liability. "Sir, enemy forces massing at Grid 77. Looks like they're preparing for another push." "Artillery?" "In position. Whiskey Battery has them dialed in." Stone nodded. "Let them bunch up. Fire on my command." He turned to another officer. "Status on our guests?" "Captured Craven are secured in Detention Block C. Medical teams are seeing to their wounds." The officer paused. "Sir, they seem confused by the treatment." Stone allowed himself a thin smile. The Craven expected brutality from enemies who had fought so savagely. Human adherence to prisoner conventions baffled them. It would baffle them more when those prisoners were eventually exchanged or released, assuming any Craven leadership survived to negotiate with. "Incoming transmission from orbit," the communications officer announced. "It's Commander Vextor." "Put him through." The alien commander's scaled face appeared on screen, and Stone could see the first cracks in that supreme confidence. "Good." "Colonel Stone," Vextor began, "your resistance has been impressive, but surely you see the futility. We have more ships, more warriors. Even if you destroy this fleet, the Brotherhood will send another, and another. Your species will be ground to dust." "Maybe," Stone agreed easily. "But here's what you're not understanding, Commander. We've been preparing for this moment since we discovered we weren't alone in the universe. Every human soldier, Marine, sailor, and pilot, grew up knowing that someday, something like you would come for us." He gestured to the tactical displays showing the ongoing battle. "You think this is desperation? This is doctrine. We call it total war, and we've had centuries to perfect it. Every civilian can become a soldier. Every ship can become a weapon. Every city can become a fortress. We'll fight you in space, in atmosphere, on the ground, underground. We'll fight you with advanced weapons and sharp sticks. We'll fight you until the last human draws breath, and then our automated systems will keep fighting." "Madness," Vextor breathed. "No. Experience. We've faced extinction before, from nature, from disease, from each other. We're still here. You want to know the real difference between humans and your previous conquests?" Stone leaned forward. "We're not trying to survive this war. We're trying to win it. And we've gotten very, very good at winning wars." The transmission ended as another proximity alarm wailed on Vextor's bridge. He didn't need to check the display to know another human suicide ship was inbound. In the depths of space, a different kind of battle was unfolding. Captain Sarah Chen commanded the UES Resilience, one of humanity's few actual warships. Unlike the converted civilian vessels being thrown at the Craven fleet, the Resilience was built for war. Not advanced war by galactic standards, but human war. "Target lock on the enemy cruiser," her weapons officer reported. "Mac guns charged and ready." "Hold fire," Chen ordered, watching her tactical display. The Craven were finally adapting, spreading their formation to prevent multiple ships from being caught in suicide runs. It also spread their defensive fire. "Wait for it!" 3 cargo haulers, their holds filled with asteroid chunks for mass, accelerated toward different Craven vessels. The aliens' weapons tracked them, preparing to fire. "Now! Target their fire control systems!" The magnetic accelerator cannons spoke, hurling tungsten penetrators at 10% light speed. Not at the Craven ships themselves, but at the delicate sensor arrays and weapon mounts tracking the incoming haulers. It was like threading a needle at 1,000,000 kilometers, but Chen's gunners had been training for this their entire careers. The rounds found their marks, sensor arrays shattered, weapon mounts went offline. For crucial seconds, the targeted Craven ships were partially blind. The cargo haulers slammed home. 2 were destroyed by secondary batteries, but 1 made it through, its nuclear payload adding another dead Craven vessel to the growing graveyard. "Helm! Evasive pattern Delta. They'll be angry about that one." Sure enough, plasma fire erupted from the Craven fleet, seeking vengeance for their fallen comrade. But Resilience was already moving, using the debris field for cover while its weapons recharged. "Ma'am," her sensor officer called out, "I'm reading something odd. Energy buildup in the Craven dreadnought. It looks like they're preparing for orbital bombardment." Chen's expression hardened. The Craven were done playing by conventional rules. They were going to glass the surface. All ships," she broadcast on the command frequency. "Execute Ragnarok Protocol. Repeat. Execute Ragnarok Protocol." Across the human fleet, what remained of it, acknowledgement signals flashed. Ragnarok was their last-ditch option, the one they'd hoped not to use. But if the Craven wanted to escalate, humanity would show them escalation. On the surface, alarms screamed through every human position. Orbital bombardment incoming. Energy readings suggested planet cracker-level firepower. The Craven intended to turn New Sparta into a molten ball of glass. "All units, code black. Repeat, code black. Bunker down and prepare for impact," Stone ordered. Then to his staff, "Is everything ready?" "Yes, sir. The packages are in position." Stone nodded grimly. When humanity had colonized New Sparta, they'd done so with the full knowledge that it might become a battlefield. The planet's crust was honeycombed with more than defensive bunkers. It held surprises that the Craven couldn't imagine. In orbit, Commander Vextor watched the bombardment countdown with grim satisfaction. The humans had fought well, but this would end their resistance. No species could survive the kind of firepower he was about to unleash. "Commander!" his sensor officer suddenly shouted. "Massive energy signatures from the planet. They're by the void. They're everywhere." The tactical display lit up like a festival. Hundreds, no, thousands, of launch signatures erupted from hidden silos across New Sparta's surface. Not missiles, something else. "What are those?" Vextor demanded. His answer came as the first wave reached orbit. They were mines. Simple, brutal devices. Fusion warheads wrapped in shells of radioactive cobalt and worse elements. They didn't need to be smart or guided. They just needed to be numerous. The humans had seeded their own orbital space with death, turning near space into a radiation-soaked hellscape that would last for decades. Any ship passing through would accumulate lethal doses within hours. Shields might stop the explosions, but radiation was insidious. "They're denying us the planet," Zarkon realized. "Even if we glass it, we cannot claim it. The radiation—" "Monsters," someone whispered. "They've poisoned their own world rather than let us have it." But worse was coming. The second wave of launches wasn't mines. They were ships, automated, unmanned, carrying no life support or safety systems, just engines, basic AI, and fusion warheads. Hundreds of them, each following simple programming. Find Craven ship, ram Craven ship, detonate. The Craven fleet's defensive fire lashed out, destroying dozens, then scores. But for every drone destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. The humans had apparently been building these things in underground factories for years, preparing for exactly this scenario. "Break orbit," Vextor ordered. "All ships, emergency burn. Get us out of this death trap." But even as his fleet began to move, new contacts appeared on the sensors. Human ships, the real warships this time, emerging from hidden positions in the asteroid belt where they'd been waiting. They'd used the suicide attacks and drone swarms to herd the Craven fleet exactly where they wanted them. Captain Chen watched the Craven ships trying to escape the orbital kill zone. "All ships, concentrate fire on their engines. Let's see how they like being trapped." The remaining human warships, perhaps a dozen in total, opened fire with everything they had. Not trying to destroy the massive Craven vessels. That was beyond their capability. But crippling engines, damaging maneuvering thrusters, keeping them in the radiation field longer, that they could do. On the ground, the Marines emerged from their bunkers as the orbital bombardment failed to materialize. The Craven ground forces, cut off from orbital support and surrounded by an enemy that refused to break, found themselves in an untenable position. Some tried to surrender. They quickly learned that humans, while respecting the rules of war, were not gentle captors. Those who laid down arms were processed efficiently, stripped of weapons and armor, and secured. Those who continued fighting discovered that human mercy had very definite limits. In one section of the battlefield, Sergeant Maria Rodriguez led her squad through the burning remains of a Craven position. Her Marines moved with the easy confidence of predators in their natural environment. They'd lost friends today, good men and women who'd never see home again. But that was war. Human war. "Sarge, got movement in that bunker." "Jenkins, fragate. Kowalski, cover him." The grenade sailed through the air with practiced precision. The explosion was followed by silence. "Clear. Move up." They passed the bodies of Craven warriors, each one representing technology and training centuries beyond human capability. It hadn't saved them. In the end, all the shields and plasma weapons in the galaxy couldn't overcome the simple fact that humans had been practicing killing for far, far longer. Back in space, the Deathbringer shuddered under another impact. Not from weapons fire this time, but from a drone that had slipped through the point defense grid. The damage was minimal, but cumulative. Death by 1,000 cuts. "Sir," the navigation officer reported, voice strained, "we've lost 30% thrust. At this rate, we'll be trapped in the radiation field for another 6 hours." 6 hours? Vextor could already see the effects on his crew. Scales beginning to discolor from radiation exposure. Warriors moving more slowly as cellular damage accumulated. Their shields kept out the worst of it, but not all. And the humans kept coming. Another drone impact. Another small percentage of capability lost. How? Vextor asked the universe. How can they do this to their own world? His answer came in the form of another transmission from the surface. Colonel Stone again, looking no worse for wear, despite the hell of the past hours. You're wondering how we can irradiate our own planet, Stone said without preamble. Simple. We've done worse to Earth. Nuclear war, biological weapons, chemical devastation. We've survived it all. We know how to clean up radiation. We know how to rebuild. In 50 years, New Sparta will be habitable again. Your empire won't last 50 hours if you keep pushing us. You're insane. All of you. No, Commander, we're experienced. This isn't our first apocalypse. It won't be our last. Stone's expression was granite. But it might be yours. You have two choices. Withdraw now while you still can, and spread the word that human space is off limits. Or stay, and we'll turn this entire sector into a monument to why you don't attack humanity. The bridge of the Deathbringer fell silent, except for the constant alarms of incoming drones and radiation warnings. Vextor looked around at his dying warriors, his crippled fleet, his shattered reputation. In 300 years, the Craven Brotherhood had never retreated. In 300 years, they'd never fought humans. All ships, Vextor spoke slowly, each word tasting of ash. Prepare to withdraw. Best speed to the jump point. Sir? Zarkon couldn't hide his shock. We're retreating? We're surviving, Vextor corrected. Plot course for home space, and send a message to Brotherhood Command. Tell them. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Tell them the contract is void. The humans are not worth the price. As the battered Craven fleet limped toward the system's edge, leaving behind a third of their number as radioactive debris, Colonel Stone stood in the Firebase Thermopylae Command Center. His staff was already coordinating cleanup operations, tallying casualties, preparing for the long work of decontaminating their world. Think they'll be back, sir? His aide asked. Stone watched the tactical display showing the retreating alien fleet. No, Captain. They'll spread the word. It's bad for business to attack someone who treats war like we do. And if others come, the colonel smiled grimly. Then we'll teach them the same lesson. We've been preparing for this moment since we looked up at the stars and realized we weren't alone. Every human knows the truth. The galaxy is vast and full of threats. But we're humanity. We don't just survive. He turned from the display as casualty reports started coming in. They'd lost thousands of good people today, soldiers who'd given everything to protect their species, but they'd won. Not through superior technology or advanced tactics, but through the simple, brutal arithmetic of total war. We endure. The Galactic Trade Consortium's emergency session had been called for the first time in 40 standard years. Representatives from 300 species filled the massive amphitheater on the neutral world of Convergence Point, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony that the translation system struggled to process. At the center of it all, Director Kylos of the Etherian Republic called for order. His species, ancient and respected for their neutrality, traditionally mediated such gatherings. The matter before us requires immediate attention, Kylos intoned, his crystalline form pulsing with bioluminescent patterns. The human incident at New Sparta has implications for all civilized space. A murmur ran through the assembly. Everyone had heard something about what happened, but rumors varied wildly. Some said the humans had used forbidden weapons. Others claimed they'd made pacts with dark entities from beyond known space. The truth, as often happened, was somehow more disturbing. I call upon Commander Vextor of the Craven Brotherhood to present his report. The Craven commander entered the chamber, and a shocked silence fell. Those who knew the Brotherhood's reputation had never seen one of their warriors like this. Vextor's scales, once obsidian black, were mottled with radiation burns. He moved slowly, carefully, like someone who'd learned that sudden movements brought pain. But it was his eyes that truly showed the change. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something the Assembly had never seen in a Craven: caution. "Honored representatives," Vextor began, his voice lacking its usual thunderous authority. "I come before you to formally void the contract between the Craven Brotherhood and the Trade Consortium regarding the human systems. Furthermore, I recommend immediate classification of human space as a Class X hazard zone." The uproar was immediate. Class X was reserved for spacefaring civilizations deemed too dangerous for normal contact, species that had transcended conventional warfare or possessed weapons that threatened galactic stability. In the million-year history of galactic civilization, fewer than a dozen species had earned that designation. "On what grounds?" demanded the Vorthan ambassador, its tentacles writhing in agitation. "The humans possess no exotic technology. Their ships are primitive by our standards. How can they warrant such classification?" Vextor activated a holographic display. The Assembly watched in stunned silence as the Battle of New Sparta played out in compressed time. Ships turned to weapons, a planet's orbit seeded with radioactive death, soldiers who fought with savage precision that spoke of countless generations of practice. "The humans do not fight wars," Vextor said quietly. "They commit to mutual annihilation and call it victory. They have turned their own evolutionary weakness, their fragility, into the ultimate weapon. They assume they will die in battle, so they optimize for damage rather than survival." He showed footage from the ground battle: Marines advancing through plasma fire, wounded humans fighting until their bodies simply stopped functioning. The cold, professional communication between soldiers as they coordinated death. "We have fought the saurian hegemonies, crushed the mantid swarms, even faced down a void kraken in deep space," Vextor continued. "But we have never encountered a species that treats war as the humans do. To them, it is not conquest or glory or even survival. It is—" He paused, searching for words in a dozen languages before settling on the human term. "Tuesday." The Etherian director leaned forward. "Surely you exaggerate. No species can maintain such a stance indefinitely." "With respect, Director, the humans have been in constant warfare for their entire recorded history. When they achieved unity on their homeworld, they didn't celebrate peace. They prepared for the next war, the one they knew would come from the stars." Vextor brought up historical data the Craven had gathered. "In the 2 centuries since achieving spaceflight, they have built their entire civilization around the assumption of eventual conflict. Every colony is a fortress. Every citizen receives basic military training. Every piece of civilian technology is designed with military applications in mind." The Ashanti delegate, its melodious voice skeptical, asked, "And their actual military?" "Is only distinguished from their civilians by degree, not by nature. Their professional soldiers train constantly for scenarios we would consider impossible. They study defeated enemies not to gloat, but to learn. They take pride in achieving victory against superior forces through what they call force multipliers, tactics and strategies that compensate for technological disadvantage." Another hologram showed human military doctrine, translated into galactic standard. The Assembly grew quieter as they read. "Every Marine a rifleman," someone read aloud. "Every sailor damage control. Every pilot a weapon. Every ship expendable. Every colony a battlefield. Every human a potential combatant." "They cannot possibly maintain such a stance," the Etherian director insisted. "The psychological toll alone would break any other species," Vextor agreed. "But humans evolved on a death world, competing against predators, diseases, environmental hazards, and most importantly, each other. Their history is a litany of horrors that would drive other species mad. They've normalized it." What we call post-battle trauma, they call Tuesday night. He showed one final piece of footage. It was from after the battle, recorded by a Craven warrior being treated for injuries by human medics. The humans were professional, even kind, treating enemy wounded with the same care as their own. In the background, Marines were already repairing defenses, cleaning weapons, preparing for the next fight. One Marine, barely out of adolescence by human standards, was calmly field-stripping his weapon while eating what the translator identified as a sandwich. His uniform was scorched and blood-stained. He'd personally killed 3 Craven warriors in hand-to-hand combat less than an hour ago. He was humming something the translator called pop music. "They don't even see it as unusual," Vextor said quietly. "To them, this is normal, expected. They beat us not through superior technology or numbers, but because they were willing to do anything to win. And when the battle was over, they simply moved on to the next task." Silence fell over the assembly. Finally, the Vorthan ambassador spoke again. "What do you recommend?" "Quarantine," Vextor said immediately. "Complete isolation of human space. No trade, no contact, no provocation. Let them expand outward if they wish. Space is vast. But make it clear that any aggression against human holdings will be met with the full response of their species. And if they become aggressive? If they decide to expand through conquest?" Vextor's mandibles clicked in what might have been dark humor. "Then we pray they find worthier opponents than us to focus on. The humans have a saying, 'The enemy of my enemy is my friend.' I suggest we avoid becoming their enemy." The debate raged for hours, but in the end, the vote was clear. By a margin of 298 to 2, human space was designated Class X, off limits to all consortium members. Trade would be conducted through neutral intermediaries. No military forces would enter human territory. No colonies would be established within 50 light-years of human space. It was unprecedented. Never before had a species been quarantined not for having superior technology, but for having superior will. 6 months later, Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of humanity's newest warship, the UES Remember New Sparta. Unlike the converted civilian ships that had fought the Craven, this was purpose-built for war. Human war. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the Etherian delegation," her communications officer reported. "Put it through." The crystalline form of Director Kylos appeared on screen. Behind him, Chen could see other alien representatives, all maintaining careful, respectful distances. "Admiral Chen, I trust the reconstruction of New Sparta proceeds well." "Ahead of schedule, Director. Radiation levels are dropping faster than projected. We'll have full habitability restored within 30 years. "Remarkable." The Etherians' patterns shifted in what Chen had learned indicated unease. "I wish to confirm humanity's understanding of the consortium's decision." Chen nodded. "We understand, Director. Human space is quarantined. We'll respect your borders if you respect ours." "And if others attack human holdings?" A smile played at the corner of Chen's mouth. "Then they'll learn the same lesson the Craven did. We don't start wars, Director. We finish them." "The galaxy watches, Admiral. Some with fear, others with curiosity. There are species out there far more dangerous than the Craven." "We know," Chen said simply. "We're preparing for them." The transmission ended, and Chen turned to her crew. Young men and women trained from childhood in the arts of war, ready to defend humanity against whatever the galaxy might throw at them. "Status report," she ordered. "All systems nominal, Admiral. The fleet is forming up. Colony ships report ready for departure." Chen nodded. The quarantine would slow human expansion, but not stop it. There were unclaimed systems beyond consortium space, and humanity would settle them. Each new world would be another fortress, another fallback position, another place where humanity could make a stand if necessary. And it would be necessary. Chen had no illusions about that. The galaxy was vast and full of dangers. The Craven had been a test, a proof of concept. Humanity had passed, but harder tests would come. "Set course for the frontier," she ordered. "Let's see what's out there." As the human fleet departed, watched by 100 hidden sensors from a dozen nervous species, word continued to spread through the galaxy. In bars and trading posts, in military academies and government chambers, the story was told and retold. The Craven Brotherhood, undefeated for 3 centuries, had met a species that didn't just wage war, they lived it. A species that would poison their own worlds rather than surrender them, that would turn their ships into missiles and their soldiers into weapons. That fought with the cold professionalism of those who had turned killing into science. And perhaps most terrifying of all, a species that did all this while considering it perfectly normal. On a trading station in neutral space, a young Saurian merchant listened to an old Craven warrior tell the story. The warrior's scales still showed radiation damage. His movements still carried the careful precision of one who'd learned fear. But surely, the merchant said, they must have some weakness, some limit to their willingness to fight. The old warrior looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. "Perhaps, but I'll tell you this, young blood. If you find it, don't try to exploit it, because the humans have a saying, what doesn't kill us makes us stronger, and we barely scratch them." He took another drink of the fermented algae the station served as alcohol. "No, if you're smart, you'll do what we're doing. Leave them alone. Trade with them if you must. They're surprisingly reasonable when not threatened. But never, ever, give them a reason to show you what they're really capable of." "What do you mean, really capable?" "What you described sounds like their maximum effort." The old warrior laughed, a sound like grinding stone. "Maximum effort? Boy, they were defending one colony with a fraction of their fleet. They used conventional weapons and standard tactics. You want to know what scares me? It's knowing that everything they did to us, they've done worse to each other. Nuclear weapons, they've used those on their own cities. Biological warfare, they've wiped out entire populations of their own kind. Chemical weapons, orbital bombardment, systematic genocide, all tested and perfected in wars against other humans." He leaned closer, his voice dropping. "What we faced was their restrained response, their measured retaliation. If they ever decide the galaxy itself is a threat." He shuddered. "There's another human saying, better to die on your feet than live on your knees. They mean it. Every last one of them means it." The merchant left the bar much sobered. Over the following weeks, he spread the story, as did hundreds of others. The legend grew in the telling, but at its heart remained a simple truth. Humanity had arrived on the galactic stage, and they'd brought with them the most dangerous weapon in existence, the absolute willingness to use it. On Earth, in a secure bunker beneath Geneva, the United Earth Defense Council met to discuss the aftermath of New Sparta. General Patricia Williams, Earth's senior military commander, addressed the assembled leaders. "The consortium's quarantine is better than we'd hoped. It gives us time to build up our forces without appearing aggressive. Time to develop new technologies. Time to prepare for the real threats." "You think there are worse out there?" the Australian Prime Minister asked. Williams nodded grimly. "Count on it. The Craven were mercenaries, used to fighting species that wanted to survive more than they wanted to win. But there are empire builders out there, religious zealots, species that view other life as food. We got lucky this time. Next time, we'll be ready," the American president said firmly. "How long until the new fleet is operational?" 3 years for the first wave, 10 for full deployment. But I want to be clear, we're not just building ships. We're building a military culture that can sustain indefinite conflict. Every human needs to understand that we're in this for the long haul. The psychological studies suggest that's already happening, the Japanese representative added. Children born since first contact show remarkably high adaptation to conflict scenarios. They're not traumatized by the idea of war. They see it as inevitable. Good, Williams said, though her expression was complex. Because it is inevitable. The galaxy just learned that humans are dangerous. Sooner or later, something out there will decide to test that. And when they do... She brought up a holographic display of human space, showing current colonies and projected expansion over the next century. Every world was marked with defensive installations. Every system showed fleet positions. Every citizen was tracked in military databases, ready to be called to serve. When they do, they'll learn what the Craven learned. Humanity doesn't just win wars, we perfect them. The meeting continued for hours, planning for threats that might not come for decades or centuries. But they would come. Everyone in the room knew it. It was the one constant in human history. There was always another war, and humanity would be ready for it. In deep space, far from any star, a derelict Craven dropship drifted in the void. It had been hulled during the battle, its crew killed instantly, its systems dead. But its black box recorder had survived, as they were designed to do. A salvage crew from a species that preferred to remain unnamed found it months later. They downloaded the data, hoping to find valuable intelligence or technology. Instead, they found the last moments of strike leader Corval and his warriors. The audio was garbled, damaged by radiation and time, but the final words were clear. Translated from Craven battle tongue, they were simple. They're not afraid. Gods help us, they're not afraid. The salvage crew deleted the recording and left the wreck where they'd found it. Some knowledge was too dangerous to possess. Some truths were better left unlearned. But they remembered. And when they told others of what they'd found, they always ended with the same warning. Stay away from human space. Whatever you do, whatever the reason, stay away. There are things in this galaxy worse than death. The humans have met them all, and they've won. And so the legend grew. Not of human technology or tactics, but of human nature itself. A species that had looked at the vast, dangerous galaxy and seen not a threat to run from, but a challenge to overcome. A species that treated apocalyptic warfare as standard operating procedure. A species that would burn their own worlds and call it victory. The Craven Brotherhood never took another contract involving humans. When asked why, Commander Vextor would simply show his radiation scars and say, "There is no profit in extinction." Other mercenary groups took note. Within a year, the human clause became standard in military contracts, voiding all obligations if human forces became involved. It was unprecedented. It was necessary, because the galaxy had learned a terrible truth. Humans weren't just willing to die for their cause. They were willing to kill for it, to sacrifice anything, destroy anything, endure anything. They had evolved on a world that tried to kill them daily and emerged not despite the crucible, but because of it. And now they were among the stars, bringing with them the hardest lesson their cruel world had taught. In war, there are no winners, only survivors. And humans? Humans were very, very good at surviving.